Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9. I'm Paul Kretschmer, with the second of two broadcasts with Jonathan Feldstein from the Genesis 123 Foundation, where he picks up, once again covering some ground from yesterday, on what the Muslim world thinks of Jews.
An Islam that despises Judaism and despises Christianity. Maybe there's a jealousy because we're the only people who actually worship and have a relationship with the creator of the universe. But it's a horrible situation that's biblical and showing its gross ugliness in our modern day.
Is it unjustified in your view for the world to expect Israel to utilize stand downs or humanitarian pauses as Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, has called for? If you put Israel up against its opponent and can say that one nation is sovereign and chooses to be as appropriate in its behavior on the one hand, while recognizing that what Hamas has done and is doing is far from appropriate because they're terrorists. Can you draw a parallel between those who are terrorists and those who act appropriate because they're a sovereign nation and understand what the rules of war are and what appropriate behavior by nations is?
No, there's no parallel. It is completely not only unjustified; it's obscene. It's obscene, and Blinken, who saw the horrific pictures, and President Biden, who saw the horrific pictures, and John Kirby, who openly wept on live TV after seeing the images. They have to know that this is not Islam. This is not an enemy that you can negotiate with. The enemy that has to be defeated. And to call for a pause, which is it's like calling a pause is the new ceasefire. It's pasteurized the whole notion, but it's absurd. It's saying that Jewish lives don't matter. There's 1,400 people who were massacred here on the 14th and on the 7th of October, and everyone who's lost their lives since and before. It doesn't matter. We have to be given the leeway to defeat this evil, and it's an evil that's going to. I was going to say it's not going to come around and bite the West in the butt. It's there. It's doing that, and it's coming from a perspective of this moral equivalence that everything is gray area. No, there's black and white. There's good and evil. And I don't know if in my lifetime, other than September 11th, that I've ever seen such vivid good and evil. And anyone who's on the right side needs to be on the right side.
So when the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations responded with the rebuke that he did to the Secretary General of the United Nations, in your view then, and in the view of people you know, it was entirely appropriate what the ambassador said. And if I might characterize it, the thing that Mr. Guterres said was not appropriate under the circumstances as we see them.
No, people. It was gross what the Secretary General of the United Nations would say. One would hope that a mature adult getting into the position of becoming the Secretary General of one of the largest world bodies that's supposed to be about bringing peace and coexistence and the nations living together would have a sense that there's no moral justification for anything that Hamas does or stands by, full stop. And what he did was to draw some kind of equivalence in saying, well, there's a context. No, the context is not the existence of the State of Israel. The context is not the quote-unquote occupation, because Islamic murder of Jews and Christians predate the State of Israel. The context is there is evil, and that can't be pandered to. And that's why we started this petition, Free the Hostages, at the Genesis 123 Foundation website, because we need the world to step up and help Israel push back on the pressure for this pause or ceasefire, and the terrorists toying that they're going to give up 12 or 15 hostages. That's not even 10%. And what we're seeing, and this is something that I realized today when we launched the petition, we're seeing the same thing that happened at Entebbe. You and I, we've now established that we're old enough to remember the hijacking of the Air France plane to Entebbe,
yes.
Uganda in 1976, and the rescue that took place on July 4th as the U.S. was celebrating its 200th anniversary. What happened in the days and weeks preceding that was that all of the non-Jewish and non-Israeli passengers were set free. And only the Air France flight crew stayed with the Jewish and Israeli passengers. And we're at a time right now, whether someone's a Christian or just a moral human being, that they need to decide if they're going to be ones to abandon the hostages because they're Israeli and Jewish, and Israeli and Jewish lives don't matter, or if they're going to stay and stand and fight and at least sign a petition. So we're praying that millions of people around the world will sign that petition.
Is it fair to say, to conclude our conversation, Jonathan, that the fact that you have a son and a son-in-law currently in the IDF has a lot of the energy that drives you as a person and as a Jew in what you're doing and what the Genesis 123 Foundation is doing then, sir?
Well, the Genesis 123 Foundation exists to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel, regardless of my son and my son-in-law. We've been doing that since before my son went into the Army and before my son-in-law was married to my daughter. But I'm super proud of them. They both serve in combat units. They're both primed to do what they're needing to do, doing what they need to do, and I'm proud of that. And there's no place I would rather be or raise my children as a Jew in the world today, especially what we're seeing. But we're existing in a fearful time. We're existing in a period where I know my son who has not yet been called to go into Gaza, could be called to go into Gaza, could be one of the first combat troops in Shifa Hospital in Gaza City to take out the terrorists and rescue the hostages at risk of his own life. And that's so we don't kill more civilians on their side than humanly possible. We're putting my son's life on the line. We're putting the life of hundreds of thousands of other Israeli soldiers on the line, so we don't have to go in and carpet bomb the place, and we can bring back the hostages. So I'm super proud of that, and I'm super inspired by the depth and the number of Christians who are standing with us at this time. And I believe that this is something that is new and unique in history, and we need to celebrate that. We need to have victory. We need to come home and clean up our wounds, and there are a lot. There's a lot of grief. And then we need to build upon this tremendous sense of togetherness that we have as Israelis and that Jews and Christians can and should have as well.
With that in mind then, Jonathan, what's the address for the website that you could offer to listeners then?
Yeah, sure. The website is genesis123.co, genesis123.co. I encourage people to do two things today. Sign the petition. It takes about a minute. Then go back to the homepage and make a donation. We're not asking for donations from the petition. We just need to exert pressure. But a donation of even as little as $1, and I'm so inspired every day when I turn on my computer and I see more donations for $1 and $2 and $5. We are doing really good, concrete, tangible, meaningful things, and I have the privilege of reporting all of that to every single donor, whether they've donated $1 or $1,000. And I would just plead for people to donate $1 if that's what they can afford and stand with us and help us do these good things that are creating healing and are saving lives.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Feldstein, for spending some of your time at a time like this speaking to listeners in Southern New England.
My pleasure. Anytime, I'm glad to come back, and thank you, and God bless you and your listeners.
For further information about Jonathan Feldstein and Genesis 123 Foundation, call us at 860-346-1049 or office at wihsradio.org, our email address. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff or management of the station. I'm Paul Kretschmer for the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9 WIHS.